So welcome everyone, good morning. My name is Holly Senyek and I am from the Nevada PBIS Technical Assistance Center. And today we're going to talk about Tier 1 systems and practices and what that looks like. So before we get started, I just want to throw out a few shout outs, some people to thank, Nevada APBS for putting on this great conference, the Nevada PBIS Technical Assistance Center, Nevada Center for Excellence in Disabilities, and my colleagues who have contributed greatly to a lot of the content and the work that you'll see today. So what we're going to do today is go over what Tier 1 actually looks like. So what are the critical components of Tier 1, giving a few examples, and then we're going to have a really awesome practical example and look at what this actually looks like in practice with our exemplar presenters from Lemon Valley Elementary School, Mike Lansing and Colleen Winter. And so we'll get started with Tier 1 and really what it's all about. But before that, I want to just shift for a moment to talk about PBIS versus school-wide PBIS. So how many of you are familiar with that distinction? I'm seeing some nods. Excellent. Okay, so when we talk about PBS, we're talking about building effective environments that teach and encourage appropriate behavior to replace inappropriate behaviors. And so really, PBS, when it was first started, it dealt a lot with sort of individuals, but the application of these same sort of principles to a school-wide system is what we call school-wide PBIS. So it's taking those same concepts and principles and applying it at the whole school level, right? So it's building environments and using systematic and individualized strategies to build environments that are safe, effective, respectful, and that improve social and learning outcomes. So when we talk about school-wide PBIS, some of the features of what that is that first off, it's a framework. So what that means is that there is no prescribed program or manual that tells you exactly step by step of what to do. It's going to look different at every school building. What we provide is sort of a framework and a structure, and then you build from that. It's data-driven, meaning that everything we do is based around data. We evaluate data on a regular basis. This PBIS, or school-wide PBIS, is evidence-based. Also, it uses evidence-based practices within the framework. The other feature is that it's preventative. So especially at Tier 1, which we're going to focus on today, it's that idea of preventing inappropriate behavior, not letting it escalate or get to the point where more intensive interventions are needed. It includes both universal and targeted interventions, so universal meaning applied to all students in the school building, and then targeted for those individuals that might need additional, more intensive supports. It's considered a best practice and a culture change. That means that the entire culture of your school building will shift once you start implementing PBIS. It's staff directed, meaning that it's a staff team. It's not a group of PBIS people coming in and saying, here's what you do, this is exactly how to do this, and I want you to do it this specific way. Because we don't know what the context of your school is. So that means we use a team of your staff to help develop all of the systems and practices that get put into place. It's a continuum of support, right? Has everyone seen the triangle? Are you sort of familiar, right? So it's that continuum. Don't worry, I have a triangle in my presentation. That is mandated. But it's this continuum of supports, meaning that the supports match the level of need for the students. So not all students need really intensive supports. They might need less intensive, but as students need more intensive supports, the supports will begin to match that need. And it's all about creating effective learning environments using the science of behavior. How many in here are behavior analysts or behaviorists at heart? Awesome, good, I see a few, I like that. So here's my triangle. So you can tell the PBIS gods that I did put one into my presentation. It's always the joke at conferences that there must be a triangle. So we have our 3 tiers, right? Tier 1 is focused on that primary prevention. Tier 2 is the sort of specialized group interventions for some students that might need it. And then the Tier 3 is those really intensive supports, right? That's that sort of 5% of your population that takes up a lot of your time and a lot of your resources, but they need those really intensive and individualized supports. So we're going to focus on Tier 1 today. There are presentations on Tiers 2 and Tiers 3, so you can attend those. But today we're going to focus here at this preventative part. And as I mentioned, it's a framework, and that's what I'm going to really sort of focus on today, and that's why I like to provide some examples and then also have an exemplar school so they can really show you how they've sort of contextualized all of these pieces to really meet the needs of their particular school. Because what PBIS looks like at Las Vegas High School is going to be very different from a middle school in Reno, Nevada, or a larger school. I think this is Winnemucca Grammar, is that the right one? Yep, Winnemucca Grammar, right? Versus a one-room schoolhouse in Imlay, Nevada, right? You can't put the same program in place at all of these schools and expect the same outcomes. But you can put the same framework in place that allows for contextualization, and that's where it's going to be effective. So when we talk about Tier 1, I like to think about it as the building blocks. And there's some debate in the field whether you can do Tier 3 if you don't have Tier 1. My perspective on that is that Tier 1 really gives you that strong foundation, and your Tiers 2 and Tiers 3 are going to be more effective if you have those strong Tier 1 systems in place. That's not to say that we don't serve the students that might need Tier 3 services. Of course we do. But without that strong Tier 1 foundation and the systems in place to support all of the practices that you're going to put in place, you're not likely to be as successful. So 4 key elements of PBIS. We have data. Who here likes data? I should see all hands going up. I love data. One of my favorite things, right? So data is a really important piece of this. We make database decisions. We decide who is going to receive Tier 2 and Tier 3 services based on the data, these sorts of things. It helps us to support our decision making through the entire process. We have practices in place that are going to support student behavior. And then we have systems that are going to support staff behavior. And the part about the big circle here where we talk about outcomes, what that means is that you as a school decide what outcomes you're looking for, right? What is meaningful to your school? Do you want to see a reduction in minor behaviors? Do you want to see a reduction in suspensions? Whatever that might be. But you're going to look at those outcomes that you want as a school, and then you're going to put in the data, practices, and systems that will help you to achieve those outcomes. Oh, I was a little bit premature on my arrow there. Okay, so one of the things that you're also going to hear about in this conference a little bit is talking about cultural responsiveness, equity, these sorts of issues, right? So when we're talking about these same systems, we're talking about culturally equitable outcomes, right? Looking at disproportionality and those sorts of issues. Culturally valid decision making, culturally relevant evidence-based interventions, and culturally knowledgeable staff behavior, right? So focusing on that cultural competence. All right, everyone still with me? Great. So now we're going to move into what are the actual nuts and bolts of Tier 1, right? What are the steps that we need to take to be implementing Tier 1 systems and supports? So the first thing is setting a clear set of expectations. Then we have to develop procedures for teaching those expectations, ways to encourage the expectations when we see them in our students. And we also have to have a system for discouraging inappropriate behavior, right? A lot of times people think, oh, PBIS, it's all stickers and fun and games, but what about those students that need to have a discipline system in place, right? Because inappropriate behavior does occur in our schools. And we do need to address it, but what we want is a system in place that allows us to address it in a consistent manner. And then procedures for ongoing monitoring and evaluation. Are we doing what we said we were going to do? And is it working? And if not, what do we need to do to change things up so that it will work? So when we talk about expectations, we're talking about setting sort of the standards for your school. What are the expected behaviors from students and staff? And usually we pick 3 to 5 very simply stated expectations, things that are easy to remember. Think about your kids at maybe the kindergarten and elementary level. How many expectations do you think that they can remember, right? If you give them a list of 10, I guarantee you they're going to struggle, right? You want a few things that they can really hold on to and remember. They are expectations for all students and all staff in the school building, okay? So when you think about cultural relevance and contextualization, think about what are the expectations that will sort of represent your entire student body. We focus on them being positively stated, right? Kids hear a lot of, don't do this, no doing that, we don't do that here. We need to tell them, what do we do? Hey, how about we walk in the hall, not don't run in the hall, right? These sorts of things. Teaching, that's what we're all here to do. And then we pick things based on those expectations that can be translated into observable behaviors, things that you can actually demonstrate, things that you can observe your students doing. So can you actually visualize your students and your staff engaging in these behaviors in your school building? And what does it look like? So an example of expectations, pretty clear, right? I am safe, I am kind, I am responsible. And what I love about this example is that it's their pledge. So it's not just, these are our expectations or these are our rules. This is our pledge. This is the motto that our school lives by, and it's part of our culture. So when we talk about a culture shift, that's where that really comes in, right? So our culture in our school building is now about being safe, kind, and responsible. And they even painted it on their school building, which I think is really cool. But it's not enough just to say, be safe, right? What does safe look like? Is safe the same thing in the hallway as it is in the gym? No, right? Those behaviors are going to look different in the various locations. So from our expectations, we create a matrix. So here we have power as the expectation. So pride, ownership, work ethic, the E is enthusiasm, and respect. I would say this is probably more appropriate for a high school level tier 1, right? This might be a little bit too much for our elementary, middle schools. But if you look at the way that it's set up, oh yeah, here we go. So we have our expectations across the top. I love this clicker. And then our locations. And then we can describe what those expectations look like in each of the locations. So for example, pride in the classroom looks like producing quality work. If we look at pride in assemblies, it means wearing school colors and showing school spirit, right? So it's the different expectations will look different in each of the locations. Great, thanks. Okay, but it's not enough just to give kids some expectations and put some posters on our walls, right? They're not gonna read them. Well, they might, but you have to tell them to read them, right? So we have to actually teach these things. There we go. All right, so we are all here because we are in the business of teaching, right? That is what we do. So once we have this established set of expectations that everyone agrees upon, we actually have to explicitly teach them and reinforce those expectations for all students. Again, I keep coming back to this all students notion, right? That's the idea of being consistent. Okay, so what's really helpful is if we actually create lesson plans, right? So these are plans that staff and teachers can use to actually go through examples of how to teach those expectations for students. So if we look at this example, I'm not going to use my fancy pointer because I might break it again, but we look at the expectation and the behavior of being respectful in the hall. So what does that look like? Well, we need to be respectful in the hallway so that students in class can focus on their learning. Being respectful in the hallway shows strong social awareness. So there's a justification, right? We can explain to students. How many of you get students saying, why? Why? The parents in the room also know that question very well. Well, there's your why, right? Why do I need to be respectful? That's why. And then we have positive and negative examples, or what we sometimes call exemplars and non-exemplars. So we teach them what to do. We also teach them what not to do, right? So we can model to them what not being respectful in the hallway would look like, right? The teacher will model. So how many of you were in the keynote this morning? We talked about the I do, we do, you do. This is a perfect place to start implementing that, right? So the teacher can model what they're supposed to do. You practice together. You allow them the opportunity to do it, and you provide feedback or praise, right, based on how they respond. There we go. Okay. But you don't just have to have this lesson plan that sits in a binder that you maybe dust off once a year or so, right? You can get really fun and creative with this process, right? Your teachers, you know how to really get creative around teaching different concepts, right? Use that same sort of motivation here. So you can have school assemblies. Some schools have what they call a passport program, where they actually go from location to location around the school, and they engage in that teaching process with the teacher, and then the teacher stamps. Yes, you learned how to be respectful in the hallway. And then they go to the cafeteria, and the teacher stamps. Yes, you learned how to be safe in the cafeteria, right? So it's fun. They can go around and collect their stamps. You can have a rotating schedule, right, where you practice, you set out, okay, on what day and at what time are we going to teach safety in the hallway? And at what day and what time are we going to teach being respectful in the gym? And then you can actually rotate students through that. And sometimes, yes, it might take a day or a little bit of time to do this, but is it worth it when you're not having to constantly say, no running in the hallway, remember, we walk in the hallway, right? So taking the time to teach these expectations can actually reduce a lot of the problem behavior, right? We're focused on prevention here. The other thing that's not up here that you can do and get creative with is videos. And the added bonus of creating a video is then you can submit them to our video competition that we have every year, and that's a lot of fun. And it's a great way to get students and staff involved. But it's not enough just to teach the expectations, right? We then have to reinforce those expectations. We have to develop a system. How do we provide praise and let our students know that they're doing a really great job at being safe in the cafeteria, right? And you can get creative with this. Again, rewards are really effective in building new skills. So once we teach it, keep reinforcing it, keep reinforcing it. And guess what? When you reinforce it, it's going to happen more often. That's the beauty of reinforcement, right, for the behavior analysts in the room. And then you can also pair it with other things. So the important thing to note here is that we talk about reinforcement and reinforcement systems, but who can shout out what the most important piece of that is? Pairing the social praise. It's that interaction. So this gives you the opportunity to have those positive interactions, right? We talked about that this morning, the 5-to-1 at the beginning of the keynote. This is a great opportunity to let that happen. The other thing too is that when the natural consequences will eventually come to take over that behavior, right? So it might start off where you have to tell the student, you have to provide reinforcement for walking in the hallway. But eventually, the natural sort of contingencies will take on, so you don't always have to provide that reinforcement. If you think about being on task, right, in the classroom and attending to the teacher while they're talking, in the beginning, you might need to provide a lot of reinforcement around that. But guess what? There's some sort of byproducts that happen when a kid starts paying more attention in class. They start getting better grades, right? That's a natural consequence that'll come on board. So now grades become more reinforcing. And you can do this a variety of ways. A lot of times schools will use the ticket system. So it's a quick way for a teacher to say, hey, you know what? Great job walking in the hallway today. I really appreciate that you did that. You were safe. I'm gonna give you a ticket here. And then those tickets can be traded. And you can have a menu of different items that those tickets can be traded for. They're sort of like a currency, right? But you don't have to use tickets, and that is one of the big misconceptions about PBIS. We do not say that you have to use tickets. They're great and they're effective, but if you don't want to use tickets, don't use tickets, and that's okay. What we want is a reinforcement system, a way to acknowledge students for appropriate behavior. So you can do all kinds of fun things. You can have the community involved. Maybe they get some sort of discount or gift cards from community partners. maybe the cleanest classroom wins the golden trash can, right? How fun is that? We've had it where they've won the golden plunger too, right? So the grade level that has the cleanest bathroom, right? So you can have a lot of fun with this, and it doesn't need to be just tickets. Dr. McIntosh talked about this one last year, where what happened was the principal had this outside of their school. They were having a lot of difficulty with recess. And every time that the grade level, they had zero problem behavior during recess time, they would get sort of a link on their chain. Do you know how excited kids got about the link on their chain, right? That was a really big motivator for them. So they saw a really big decrease in problems on the playground just when they started adding a simple reinforcement system. Okay, so while we want to make sure that we're reinforcing appropriate behavior, we also need to make sure that we are addressing the inappropriate behavior, because the reality is that it does happen, right? But the idea about addressing inappropriate behavior is that it needs to be consistent, right? We have a lot of times where one student here got in trouble for saying one particular curse word. Another student is at the principal's office because they said another curse word. And then you got this student who said Christmas, right? Sort of random. And do you think that this is equal, right? Or equitable? No, does this seem like a fair, consistent discipline system? No, right? So by building a consistent discipline system, it, one, teaches the students what is expected, right? And what is going to happen when they engage particular behaviors. It allows the staff to have more consistency, and it's less ambiguous. So staff know exactly what they need to do when a particular behavior occurs. They know how they need to address it. And it actually really empowers staff to be able to manage behaviors in their classroom, which is a really key component. So the system is designed to reteach appropriate behavior, so it's to provide those opportunities for learning, right? So when a problem behavior occurs, how are you going to reteach the appropriate behavior in that instance? So we're trying to, again, focus on teaching and avoid emphasis on punitive consequences. It's a set of clear processes and procedures, and there's clear communication and trust amongst staff as to what is going to occur. So this is just an example, and this can, again, come in many ways, but this is an example of a flow chart, a discipline flow chart, and it sort of separates what is office managed versus what is staff managed, right? And then it has a process for how staff and administration handle particular behaviors. And then finally, our ongoing monitoring and evaluation. Right? Data, novel idea, although I sort of hope it's not too novel these days. So we have two main types of evaluation when we talk about school-wide PBIS. One is that we're evaluating implementation. So we have what's called a fidelity check. It's the tiered fidelity inventory. And it's an assessment, I don't really like to use the word assessment because it's not. We're not assessing your school. We are looking for areas where things are going well and they're in place and they're being implemented the way that they were supposed to. But then what are also the areas where we might need a little bit more work and we might need to think about how to redesign things in order to be more effective in that area. So that just looks at sort of overall implementation. And then we can also look at school-wide PBIS and its effects, right? That's ultimately what we want. We want improvements in behavior. So how do we do that, right? How do you use your school data collection systems? A lot of times we use SWIS. How many are familiar with SWIS? Okay, some districts and some schools might use other systems, but the key is that you have a data system in place that allows you to monitor minor behavior incidents, major behavior incidents. It allows you to look at behavior incidents by grade level, by ethnicity, by gender, by whether or not students are on an IEP or not, right? Disaggregating that data, and it lets you know how things are going, whether it's working. This is the tier, oh, yes?
Sorry, SWIS, is that an acronym or is that a program?
Yes, it's School-Wide Information System? Yes.
So it's a program.
Yes, it's a program. And if you talk to, so Bert Ellison is one of our guest speakers, invited speakers, and he is the guru on Swiss. So if you have questions about it, he's a great person to ask.
Yeah, no, we don't. I do the data for ours, but I was just wondering.
Yeah, there are other systems that a lot of districts will use too. And that's, like I said, the key thing is that you have a system in place that allows you to have these features to look at the data in various
I
ways.
thought it was like a skill to look at the
Oh, no, sorry. Sorry, it is a system. And so it allows you to look at data sort of in this way. So these are just some examples of outputs from Swiss. So you can look at office referrals by problem behavior, by day of the week, time, location, month, all kinds of different ways. And what that does is it allows your team to look at those data and say, okay, where are we having problems and what do we need to do about it, right? So here you can see, oh look, a lot of problems happening in the classroom. All right, what are we gonna do about our classrooms? What supports can we provide to our teachers so that they can have better classroom management skills, right, if that's the issue. So I'm going to turn this over now to see what this actually looks like in practice, and I'm really excited to have our wonderful exemplars here from Lemon Valley Elementary.
All right, thank you for allowing us to speak. My name is Mike Lansing. I am the principal at Lemon Valley Elementary School. We're like 6-ish miles north of here. There's a little ridge in Reno, and you get over and you go into a bunch of different valleys and basins, and we are essentially the first valley you get to up there. Before I talk about our school, I want to introduce people we have here. We have Dawn Halloran. She is in 2nd grade. Teacher Jen Franchi, she is a kindergarten. Irene Rogerson, she is our counselor. And then Colleen Winter, who will present with me, she is our assistant principal at Lemon Valley. And you're going to be getting this PowerPoint essentially, and our ticket system, and kind of what we do. And we'll kind of talk about who our school is real fast, the 2 types of systems that we use, and then hopefully give you some ideas and answer any questions that you have. And then off we'll go. All right, cool. So let's talk about our school real fast, who we are with the Leopards, right? Just to give you an idea, we're a Title I school, high transient population, high trauma. So that red triangle at the top of the pyramid, ours is pretty big. But student population, we have about 600 kids. That doesn't include pre-K. If you include pre-K, we're like 620, 630. Ethnicity, 44% white, 45% Hispanic, multiracial. So we're a minority majority school. Transient rate's 23%. Staff to student ratio 1 to 20. We have as much support as we can possibly get, but like all schools, right, we're underfunded. And so we have a full-time counselor. We have a peace grant. She's a woman who comes in kind of 2 or 3 days a week, more if needed. She's a social worker / counselor. If our grant is funding the right people, sometimes we'll get an additional support in there, but we don't have that right now. So we just have this one additional social worker / counselor who comes in. We've been a Title I school since 2013. Free and reduced lunch percentage is 55+. We're probably around 60% this year. I think it's a little under. It's probably lower than it actually is. We have a lot of undocumented families who I think are nervous about signing away and putting their information into the system, and so they're really leery of letting, kind of getting the services. And I believe that because we, for the 3rd year in a row, are probably going to lead the district in the most money owed due to lunches. So that tells me there's a lot of families that could get the service of Title I. And don't. And of course, as you know, Title I gives you money. We get about $500 a kid if you are Title I. So every dollar matters. Family and Community Liaison provides food bank translation and children's services and CIT services, so homeless kids. We basically, if you come to our school on a Friday, there are families getting food kind of from our school. And then every day after school, there are middle school, high school kids who come and get dinner. And so we're this kind of unique community school where we provide a lot of value and service to schools. And so I think because of that, one thing that comes of that, our school's treated fairly well. I keep waiting for our school to get tagged up or to something to happen. It never does. We had a break-in a couple years ago. It was too bad. But outside of that, kids really respect the school and love the school. And that's, I think, because we provide a lot and because we have some great systems in place. So, okay, so we do a lot of Tier 1 supports. We do a lot of social emotional learning. We do a lot of home visits. And we're going to talk about the Tier 1 supports. But I do want to keep in mind, I was a principal in New Hampshire, I was an assistant principal in Massachusetts in a very, very urban school in a city called New Bedford. It was the head of whaling in like 1820, and then that ended and went whoop, right down. So it's a rough, in Massachusetts, it's the lowest performing district in Massachusetts. It was a tough school. I was an assistant principal in Utah. I bounced around. I'm from Maine. So I will tell you that I've done a lot of PBIS, and here's what I can tell you if you want to do it or if you want to revamp yours, keep it simple. And because what ends up happening is if you have a huge complicated system, it's really difficult to manage. The teachers don't want to take it on, and it gets kind of crazy. And so the ideas are good, but the implementation is hard, right? And so I think for you all, as you are interested in maybe enhancing your PBIS, how are you going to implement it? Is it realistic? It's easy to write it down, but is it easy to do? And so for me, that's a big part of it. So we do two things. We have kind of our school-wide ticket system, and that equals a couple different things, and you have examples of those. We have 2 or 3 different types of tickets, and we'll talk about them in a second, but one equals a school-wide non-academic fun thing. We have these tubes, you fill them up, and once they're filled, we do something cool that has nothing to do with academics. Maybe like a magician comes in, or like whatever I can get for cheap. Essentially is what we end up doing, right? So, so it's what's happening, right? If I can get a local football player from UNR to come off, like great, whatever you do, right? But it's cool, it's fun, it's not academic. And Colleen will talk about the other tickets. We have these school-wide tickets, right? And then the other part is we want PBIS to happen in the classroom, but I'm not going to dictate what that looks like. I would like to see each grade level do the same thing for consistency, but they don't necessarily have to. And so each kind of grade level does a different thing. So what like Dawn will do in 2nd grade probably looks different than what Jen does in kindergarten, and what happens in 5th grade is different than that. And so the reason for that is I want ownership, and I want teachers to believe in it, and I want them to do it their way. I have ways I think are great, and I will share with you my favorite I've ever seen we do here. It's beautiful, but it may not work for you. And we don't do it in 5th grade because it's not as awesome for 5th graders. But the point is, we have school-wide, and then we have kind of classroom-wide. And the rewards are kind of the similar. We'll talk about prize boxes, all this stuff. But those are kind of our 2 systems, and it really works well. The last thing that we do, depending on the kid, is we have like what we call a home note. It's really essentially a really simplified behavior plan. We basically target a skill or what we want to see happen. The kids can earn a 2, let's pretend, or a 0 if they do that skill. And at the end of the day, if they earn X amount of points, they can get something from a prize box or whatever we have in store for them. So that's kind of that third one for specific kids, depending on what we want to see. Example, we had a new kid who left our school last year. He went to a charter school, got kicked out of the charter school, joined us 2 days ago. First day, he struggles. He locks himself into a bathroom. He won't come out. I'm like standing over the stall, like, get out of there, and he won't do it. He's in 5th grade, But here's the deal. Like, I knew the kid. I had a relationship with him, like we had talked about earlier in the presentation. And so the next day, I came up with a behavior plan for him, very basic stuff. We figured out what he wanted. He wanted to visit this teacher at the end of the day if he could earn it. The 2 things we were shooting for are don't be mouthy to the teacher, essentially, like don't talk back, don't argue, and like stay in the classroom. That's it. Like, I don't care if you did work or not, whatever. Like, as long as you didn't talk back and as long as you stayed in the classroom, like, we're golden. And so he does it. He has a great day. Of course, his great day is staying in the classroom and learning. And guess what? He's going to learn because he's in the classroom and he's not being mouthy. And thus, that's the other PBIS support that we do.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
For sure. And just so you know, we kept his home note on desktop for when he would return to us because we knew he was coming.
We knew he was coming back.
We're on tier 1. So what we prepared here is just a copy of the PowerPoint. Feel free to take notes. The other thing we included, because it doesn't come out very clearly on the PowerPoint, is our actual ticket system. And that's what we stapled to your PowerPoint. So one of the things that Mike and I believe in firmly is leadership. We have leadership at each grade level, also leadership from our EL and our SPED teachers, and we have leadership that meets twice a month. One of the leaderships is a book study, the other leadership is meant to handle kind of school-wide issues that come up and get voices heard from the grade level teachers and some of their concerns. What we realized when we were revisiting our tier 1 instruction, our tier 1 supports, was that we didn't really have a motto to live by. And if you think about how a school structure works, You have to have something that everybody buys into, that the families buy into, the kids buy into. And at that point, 2 years ago, we really didn't have a motto, so that was one of our ahas in leadership. We also had a beliefs, mission, and vision, but nobody really knew what it was. And schools are dynamic places. Staff come and go, families come and go, students come and go. And so when it was crafted, more than a few years ago, I think, the culture, our community really bought into it. But when we went to revisit it, nobody really knew what that was. So we, as a leadership team, really invested a lot of time. It was a year-long process into saying, what do we believe? What are our beliefs about our community? What are our hopes and dreams for our students? What are their parents and students' dreams and hopes? And how are we going to craft that? So over a year-long process, and we had families contribute mottos, we had students contribute mottos, we had classrooms contribute mottos. This was our winner that we came up with, and everybody is behind it. We hear it frequently in morning announcements. We hear it frequently with teachers saying it, is learners are valued and empowered to succeed. Mike purchased this huge banner that we have in our lunchroom, and that's a picture of it.
Yeah, it's like 10 by 5. It's just
Right,
stupidly
right.
huge. It's
Big,
just-
bigger is better. Bigger
Yeah.
is better. And so it was really a cornerstone for us to kind of redefine ourselves as part of our tiered support. Okay, the next is really each teacher has these in their classrooms. It's posted in multiple places around our school. In addition, it's in our foyer where we welcome families that come in, so they know what we stand for. They know what we believe in, and this is what we live by.
And I'm more, like every school, I think smart kids can kind of manipulate and, I was being safe. I can jump off a chair and never get hurt. I'm safe, right? And so I think we always have, this is in every classroom. Kids can read this. I don't think kids can memorize it and spit it at you, but kids can tell you what safe looks like, and kids know that because we practice it. But it's here. It's a part of the whole child. But our tier 1 doesn't necessarily say this is our mission, you guys. Remember, we don't do that. We practice, we reinforce, but we do you do have to be moving together in the boat, right? The analogy I use is, man, if one person's rowing backwards and one person's rowing forward, you're just going to spin, right? That's what's going to happen. And so you got to be moving together. So we came up with a model. We came up with this so that we are moving together.
And it really starts with our staff and our parents to buy into what we believe, and then it spreads to our students. Okay, one of the things that Mike brought on, and I think all of our staff agree, at the beginning of the year, we revisit what we believe, we revisit our mission. And this is as a result of our staff training in August of this year. We did kind of a round robin around our lunchroom. We have a lunchroom. And so there were posters up there, and each person went to each poster and put words up that answered that question for them, what they believed about our kids. And if you can see, it starts out with our students may be challenged by resources, home, life, language, behaviors, times, consistency, responsibility, support, and as Mike said, we have a lot of trauma. We have taken on becoming a trauma-informed school this year, which requires a lot of training on the part of the district counseling department, but we really believe if we understand the trauma that our kids go through, we can be more responsive to them and less reactive and more helpful.
The point of this is the 4th year in a row I've done at 2 different schools, right? The point of this activity is to remind all the staff that all our kids have challenges, but they're all awesome in their own way, right? And man, every day, man, there are kids, but here's the deal. If you come in and you already have a negative connotation or belief about a kid, it's going to be really difficult to write your own mental ship and that kid's behavioral ship, right? It's difficult. So this reminds us every day or the beginning of the year that, hey, you may get a kid in your class who you, quote, heard about or you feel is terrible, but they're not. They have challenges, they have struggles, but they're good kids and they're going to be successful. And this is a reminder of that, again, to get us moving together.
Right.
Oh, sorry. Let me go back.
And so the teachers came up with this, and we have many new teachers, but we also have teachers who've been in the profession 20 and almost 30 years. So this is a really broad perspective of how they view their students, and you see a lot of positives that come from that. And also, when it comes to what we represent for our community, we represent, like Mike said, we feed them. We feed them in the morning, we feed them at lunch, we feed them at night, we give them coats, we have a food bank. We have supports for CIT students. We provide safety and stability, basic needs and security. And if you can kind of think about what a student needs when they walk through the door, if they haven't eaten in the morning, if they don't have a coat, if they don't have, some of our kids come in flip-flops when it's snowing outside, they don't have shoes. So we start off with the basics and then we move into some of the things that really, really build on students' skills.
Yeah.
So when you had your whole staff to do this, what are these posted somewhere now?
Yeah, there are posters around the lunchroom, and each staff member visits the poster and writes.
It's just like you're in like groups of 4, let's say, and there's sticky charts everywhere, right? And each group is at a sticky chart. And then there are essentially 4 central questions, and each group like writes it down, and then they kind of talk about it, and then we kind of repeat that process 4 times, like who are our kids, what does the school represent? And you have 4 questions, and then at the very end you all go around and look at it and check it out and kind of talk about it.
And then you put this together and now that's posted?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's right. Final product.
Where
Is it just?
Where's this posted?
Oh, this is, thanks for the question. I took all those charts and I typed them up, and these are on the door to the staff room. So that teachers.
Yeah, you got it. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
No, students and families can view it.
Oh, okay.
Students and families can view it. Okay,
Any
we've got
concern with students and families viewing our students may be challenged by?
Well, no, we're not. I think it's who they are. It's the reality, right? And I don't know, like not every student sees this. You'd have to be on the way to go to the central office to get to that. So not every kid would do that. But I think it's okay. I think it's fair for the community. I mean, the community knows this. They live it. And I think if anything, they're say like, hey, you know what? Like at least Lemon Valley knows what we're about. That's a good thing.
So we're going to be mindful of our time. We're going to move on to the pause matrix. As Holly said, you need to teach this. So we do have a video that's made that highlights each of the pause matrix. We have safe, respectful, and responsible. We also ask the teachers to start out at the beginning of the year and each long break to revisit the expectations. So each teacher has this in their classroom. They can show the video as well. And we also provide lesson plans, too, for the teachers. What we did in the pause matrix is when we reviewed it with our Tier 1, our pause matrix was so old it didn't include electronics. So that was our first step in our Tier 1 cohort, is we included electronics. So that's what you'll see in all classrooms. Okay, so the first, and you have an example of it on your handout, Leaping Leopards. This is a teacher in the lunchroom. She does lunchroom. This is one of our students, and she's able to do Leaping Leopards. It's for exemplary behaviors. It can be given by the classroom student to a classroom teacher, or basically anyone to an individual student. Okay, this is Leaping Leopards for the bus. Our bus drivers, they are awesome. They do a job that I wouldn't want to do in my wildest dreams. They get kids to and from school safely, and they're able to give Leaping Leopards as well. Okay, here are some examples of things, and we really promote non-cost, low-cost things, but Mike and I are more than willing to have teachers order from Oriental Trading to get their prize box if that's what they need, but we really want to promote things that are reinforcing for the kids that don't cost money.
So basically, you see a kid doing something great, whatever that is. Like, hey, you picked up trash, way to go. Thank you for keeping the school safe. You whip out this guy, you write it down, you give it to him. It can happen on the bus, it can happen on the playground, it can happen in the lunchroom. It can happen all over the place. I can give them, Colleen can give them, the custodians can give them, etc. It's a whole school approach. That's the idea. And they can earn different types of things. This is pretty classic. They can earn different things.
I would think too, with the population of students that you have, the lower cost, like the more teacher time or staff time that you can give as a reward to these students, provide with more stability and safety, and may additionally reinforce those behaviors as
Absolutely.
well.
Our SPED teachers, our upper grade teachers find that a lot. The kids want to spend time with
Yeah.
their teachers at lunch. They take their hot lunch, their free and reduced lunch. They take it to the classroom and they sit and spend time. So you're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, so the last one we do is there's a different one. It's a lot of it's attendance. We have huge truancy issues. So now if kids show up, if they are, if they're there every day through a certain chunk of time, they'll receive a green ticket, the one that you have. And also if they can receive a green ticket for being safe, being responsible, or for being excellent and empowered. And basically what ends up happening is they fill this tube. This is what I was talking about. They fill a tube. There's one for 3-5. There's one for K-1-2. Sweet handmade posters. And they fill the tube. When the tube gets to the line, that's when we invite in whoever. We had a one-act play come in. It was really fun. Last year we had, a magician come in. And in previous schools I had like race car drivers come in with like their cars. It was super cool. Yeah.
So they can spend it or put it in the ticket?
Oh, so there's two different. So the blue ones that you have, the blue ones they can spend, and then the green ones go into this tube for the whole school activity.
Right, the beauty of this is nobody's a loser, everybody's a winner by the whole school behavior.
Right.
And so there is kind of a little bit of a competition between K-1-2 and 3-4-5, but both tubes have to be filled before we bring in that, whatever that assembly is.
Yeah, my idea was if all kids are rewarded, even if a kid didn't earn a green ticket, like they still see the value in it. So maybe next time they'll pick up that trash. Maybe next time they'll help their friend out when their friend falls down, whatever.
So if I'm a teacher, how do I decide to give a green or a blue? It's on student preference, or it's on the behavior they used, or?
So the blue ticket is pause,
Yeah.
pause matrix, and the green ticket, we have, Mike, you want to go back to the other slide, please? There's a couple ways to earn it. One, I do attendance every 2 weeks, and I look at attendance, and we have a really strict attendance policy this year in Washoe County. 17, in excess of 17 absences that aren't made up in a certain way, you can be retained. So it has a lot of bite to it this year. It didn't when we put this system in place. We were just kind of trying to grapple with it. So I go over attendance and we set criteria for first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. If a student is below so many absences, that student gets a ticket. So I take a class roster, student below the ticket, below that criteria, they get a green ticket. The teacher says, great job on your attendance. You've been here. You've done a wonderful job. The second way to get it is the Leading Leopard. We do, the leadership team felt very firmly that citizenship, recognizing citizenship overall was missing in our process. So we incorporated the Leading Leopards, those are the green tickets, for these type of citizenship focuses. So we have focuses every year, and when we do assemblies, those kids are also recognized. A couple kids are recognized, but those are our focuses through those months for citizenship.
Yeah, it's like citizenship and attendance based are the green ones, and the blue ones are more like, hey, let's earn something from our prize box. Let's earn Principal Pizza Day. And so, okay, so these are assemblies. We talked about them. People come in, and this is just examples of people giving them out.
Is there like a, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
Is
no, it's
there
all good.
Certain amount you want to see on a regular basis, or like if like kids are just doing super well, like you're not going to go get somebody like every 2 weeks because this thing's just.
No, I will stuff that thing down. I will. Yeah, I mean honestly, like every 2 months.
Okay.
You want to earn it. It's in the cafeteria. Kids see it. It's kind of fun, and the assemblies are like a pretty big deal. And so.
And so like the staff and stuff when they're handing them out kind of know that on a.
Yeah.
There's been some kind of conversation.
Not really. I think they know it takes a while to fill up. That tubes are pretty big, and again, the teacher needs to make a choice. Am I going to use the blue for sort of my individual class expectations? It's a great reinforcer, or do I want to kind of make a choice to give more green? And the teacher makes that choice. They don't fill up fast though. All right, so here we go. So Tier 1, individual class management, right? This is probably a big reason why we're here. I love behavior management. I love Harry Wong. He's like my favorite behavior person ever. What we believe at Lemon Valley is the wider your behavior management pyramid, the higher your peak, right? And the higher your peak is better academics, better achievement. And so that's what I believe in. And so again, so you've seen kind of the whole class, the whole school ones. You do a great job in the recess, like here's a blue ticket, here's a green ticket, great. But now we're talking about individual stuff in the classroom. And so this is when the teacher has autonomy to kind of do what they want to do, however it works. But the teacher needs to do a couple things. One, it needs to be incredibly clear what their expectations are, and that's reviewed, there's a visual on that, and it's touched all the time. We're very clear that after long breaks, after snow days, after times where kids aren't back, like we make an emphasis to kind of pause academics in the beginning of the day and re-emphasize and re-talk about our structure and re-talk about our expectations. Because if you don't do that, kids forget. And so for me, here's some really good examples of what people do. We use ClassDojo, some do. If you want to, great. If you don't, great. ClassDojo is a classic one. The challenge of ClassDojo is it needs to be done fast, right? And sometimes it's hard to like roll over to your computer and ding, ding, ding when you're teaching. Some people use the phone. That's good. If you're tech savvy, you can do it. It's not my favorite. This one here, though, is my favorite. And I think it's beautiful and I think it's wonderful. And what some classes do is they reward students for good behavior, and their good behavior is whatever expectation they want to see. And it could be a lot of things. It might be raising hands, it might be good transitions, it might be not talking, whatever. It's whatever you want to see, that's your expectation. And what they do is they have like an apron on and they whip out like a hairband and they give the kid a hairband if they do the expectation they want. So if Johnny's struggling to raise their hand and Johnny raises his hand, he gets a wristband, the wristband goes on the wrist, and throughout the course of a day, this kid starts to develop all these wristbands on their wrists. And this is what this picture is supposed to be, but it's a sweet visual reminder of how they're doing, and it's also a really easy like reinforcer. And so here, you can imagine if this wasn't dojo, six wristbands equals like the equivalent of a green day. What we do that isn't so PBIS-y, and I want to admit to you, they don't recommend you do that, but we do this, is there are times where kids will they'll lose a wristband. And there are sometimes if a kid, like, let's say, punches another kid, but it's not like principal worthy, like you may have to give your wristband to that kid because that's a natural. Like you give that up. Like you can't yell at this kid. Like give him a wristband. And so that happens sometimes. It's kind of against PBIS a little bit, but we do it. I'll be honest with you, right? But it's beautiful. It's incredibly effective, and it works really, really well. And then last, I'm going to zip through this because I'm out. But I think here's the deal, you guys. You've got to be consistent. You have to review it, and you have to do it. And it is okay if you give 1,000 wristbands out. It's fine. Who cares? Or tickets or whatever. And you have to follow through and you have to stick with it. And what we do well is we stick with it and we do it every day and it's reinforced and we practice and we keep going, we keep going, we keep going. And if Colleen and I have to pay for pizza every week, we do it. If we have to pay for your prize boxes, we do it. But the point is, it's done, it's done, it's done. It's consistent, consistent, consistent. Sorry, I flew in the end.
I'm taking the
I know. I'm a yapper.